Welcome to Speed Talk Live, which really isn't live, but a poorly produced podcast where we talk about NASCAR and all things racing. And occasionally, we have a special guest or two when we can get them to show up. Sit down, strap in, hold on tight. Speed Talk Live is on the air.
Green flag, green, green. Go, 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 go.
Welcome, everybody, to Speed Talk Live this week. Coming out of Richmond. We're not back from it. I didn't go anywhere. We're back out of Richmond. And we have got our co-host, Owen Johnson, but with one caveat. He is not in London this week. He is back stateside. Welcome home, Owen. How are you, my friend?
Doing great, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
We're glad to have you back. And you're back here for spring break, your version of spring break. Of course, you go to college in England, and you're back for your spring break. So you're here with family and friends. You are going to Martinsville. We're going to talk about that. We're going to wrap up Richmond. I just got off the phone with Clint Bowyer, so we're going to have that interview. And then obviously we'll talk about the rants and look ahead to Martinsville. I almost said Martinsburg, like West Virginia. Martinsville this week, where you're going to be making your first visit. We'll talk about that. And then Cam Waters, the Australian supercar driver, will be making his debut Friday night. So we're going to talk about that. So let's talk about the Richmond race. Denny Hamlin was not the class of the field Sunday night, but he ended up winning. And it was kind of unusual because it was not necessarily that he had the dominant car. It was not necessarily that he was able to zoom through the field or anything. It was actually his pit crew, which was kind of strange because in the past, his pit crew has not necessarily been on their game. But you know what? They were Sunday night. In fact, his pit crew won the race for him.
Yeah, they did. Tonight was them for sure. And I feel like I just went through a 2-year period and 2020, maybe 2021, where every time I came down pit road, I was terrified. I was like, please just only lose one spot. It was bad for a really long time. And so it's just finally has turned the page and we're going the other way now. So, these guys have been together for, I think, 3 consecutive years now. They were on Martin's team, a few years ago, but they were young. And they were making a lot of mistakes that first year, and the pit crews and the drivers got together and they wanted to make changes, and so I ended up with those guys at really the right time, right when they were starting to all click on all cylinders. So, I was certainly torn because it looked like Martin was going to win. When the caution came out, I wasn't crazy overjoyed because I always think about all the bad times on pit road, and I'm thinking, well, man, I just had a good finish, and now we have an opportunity to go backwards. But I knew that if I maximized my job on pit road, and there's so many metrics that go into being good yellow line to yellow line on pit road. The pit crew's definitely a big part of it, but me as a driver doing my job with my pit road speed, how I enter the box, how I exit the box, all that really mattered. And I knew about halfway through the stop when they dropped the jack on the right side in about 3.5 seconds, I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be a fast one. So I knew it was going to be really close, and I knew at that point, just don't stall the car. That would have been the most embarrassing thing that I possibly could have done, is take the win from them if I made that kind of mistake. But then, we still got to race it out on the green, white, checkered. So this is certainly the new age NASCAR of how you can win races, because it is so equal on the racetrack that really the pit crew is the ones that really make a difference when everyone's running the same speed.
Of course, Hamlin won, but perhaps no one was more disappointed than Martin Truex Jr. And of course, Joe Gibbs had the happy and the high and the low. Denny won. Martin led the most laps, won a stage, but he didn't win. Joe Gibbs knew how he was going to handle that.
Well, I think here's what happens. These guys put so much into this. They're all, great competitors, and these things are so hard to win. And so when you have an experience the way Martin did tonight, to race that hard, at one point there when the 5 got in front of us on that pit stop, he came right back and got it. He drove his heart out. And so, then to have a caution, we go that far, and then to have a caution with 3 laps to go. You know, it was devastating. We came out of there and we came out second on the pit stop. And so, honestly, you just feel, you know, that's what I was trying to relate to everybody. You're happy for Denny, certainly, and everything that happened tonight for him. But then, you know, you see that in Martin, how hard he fought for this and how much he wanted it. But that's a part of our sport. It's really hard. And you see these guys, when it gets down towards the end of these races, they're going for it because they are really hard to win. And so you can't have that happen, particularly if you got good cars, good drivers. They all want it. They want it for their sponsor. They want it for themselves, their career. And so you really feel for them when they go through a night, you know, like Martin went through this night. You just feel for them.
All right, Owen. So I know you watched the race because you're in Virginia. What'd you think? What was your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is it was 3 very different stages. I think I've never seen 3 stages that race so differently. In the beginning, we had the rain tires on, which was a great thing for NASCAR. Our first Cup race with rain tires. I really want to see more of that in the future. I hope they give competitive pit stops, for instance. I think that would add another element of the strategy, but definitely good that we didn't have to wait another 2 or 3 hours to get racing. Then the second stage turned into a couple of varying strategies, interrupted in the middle with a caution, and the final stage was every car on one strategy. I think it ended up being quite an exciting race, but I think for me at least, every car on one strategy in the final race kind of took out the strategy element. And while it ended up being good, I think for the majority of it, Richmond didn't look too much more exciting than it has in the past. And I think the argument about should Richmond keep 2 races is compelling. I mean, you looked at the grandstands, attendance just wasn't high enough. Richmond took out more than a third of the grandstands recently, and those still aren't getting filled.
And you talk about the damp tires, and I thought that was fantastic. That was the first time on an oval in a points race. We used them last year during the All-Star race at North Wilkesboro, and I was there for that. And you're right, it does give us the advantage of not having to wait out till the track is completely dry, so we can actually get some racing in. I thought that was fantastic. But like you mentioned, we come up to should Richmond have 2 races, and I think if it wasn't for Kyle Busch tagging the wall and bringing out that yellow, which was kind of controversial because we didn't see any kind of debris or anything, and that really put everybody on the same strategy. I kind of would have liked to have seen it played out with the different strategies without that final caution, because that could have made things a lot more interesting. But you bring up a good point. The grandstands weren't necessarily packed. And if we would not have had that final caution when Bubba Wallace got into Kyle Larson, and by the way, Kyle Larson, something we didn't focus on because it was at the end of the race, he made an amazing recovery. I mean, he came back and really didn't lose anything. And finished third, which was fantastic. His pit crew got him some great work and got him back out there, so he didn't lose too many spots. But if it wasn't for that, and Martin would have cruised to victory. He had about just over a half-second lead coming into the final laps. I think it would have been a whole lot worse. And I think sometimes when you get those wild finishes like that, I think it's to the detriment of that makes the race more exciting, and that's what people remember. They don't remember all the stuff getting up to that. They remember just the ending. So I think it saved the race. Now, should Richmond have 2 races? It's hard to say. I think they've got a couple things working against them. The fact that it was Easter, was a religious holiday. And I'm going to go off in the rants here in a minute about that. But I think the racing at Richmond has become a little too one-grooved. And Dale Jr. on his Dale Jr. download this week mentioned that the track raced the best right after they got repaved and right after they had sealer put down the track, which opened up the grooves. And I think if you did that, you could improve the racing at Richmond.
I think I liked what I saw with the wet tires on the track with 4 or 5 wide racing at certain points right at the very beginning. And I think that just comes down to we've got to work on the short track package. And I think that Richmond, Phoenix, every short track right now is hurt by the package. And Bristol was one way to figure that out by changing up the tires. Maybe that's the way forward. I think NASCAR just has to work on the package, and then I think we solve the problem.
Yeah, I think we have the package, if we still work on the package, like you said, but we also, maybe we get Goodyear, we could put some fly in the ointment and get them to mess up some tires like they did at Bristol so they don't see that. I mean, that would probably improve the racing. Speaking of improving the racing, I just got off the phone, literally just got off the phone with Clint Bowyer, and a guy I've interviewed before on a couple of occasions. And obviously he's in the Fox Sports booth now. I interviewed him before when he was still driving, and he's always a great interview. I remember sitting in a conference room at Stewart Haas Racing one time interviewing him, and he's one of those guys that you ask a question and he goes off, and it's a 20-minute thing. You know, he's some of these drivers, man. They'll answer the question, they'll give you a great answer, and then it's all in a little package. Boom, they're done. Clint Bowyer, you pretty much start talking with him and you turn him loose, you let him talk. So here's my interview with Clint Bowyer. All right, we're talking to Clint Bowyer, Fox 30 or the Fox Sports now booth in the Fox Sports booth. And I'm glad to have you. Clint, we worked through some tech issues. It's raining here and storming here in Orlando. So I appreciate the punt and the regroup. How you doing, pal?
Good, man. Actually headed down to Charlotte, to the wonderful Queen City of Charlotte, to do a little race hub action tonight. I'm sure, I don't know, surely to God by Wednesday night we don't have to still talk about restarts that Denny Hamlin did or did not jump the restart. But more than likely that's what they'll want to talk about, so I can give my 2 cents worth. And then moving forward to Martinsville. Nice to be home. One of my favorite racetracks, one of my last race wins, and just, pretty special to me. So can't wait to get up there and watch the boys do what they do.
Let me ask you this, because you had a long, good racing career. You got out of the driver's seat in 2021, moved to the Fox booth. And I'm kind of wondering, because I remember that, because you kind of pulled the trigger on that announcement a little early. I remember that, because that was in October of 2020. But if you flash back to Pocono in 2019, you were part of the Xfinity only coverage with Harvick and Logano, and doing on Fox. Did that play into you wanting to come to Fox, or did maybe they approach you, or was it something that happened before that started this path that ended with you in the booth?
I actually don't know that answer. I think I was part of the first one that they ever did in the Xfinity, booth of drivers only. I think I was the first one. I don't even remember where we did it. Maybe Charlotte, but I do remember, the times that I did do that alongside Adam Alexander, and I think Kevin Harvick, and I think it's Joey Logano and myself and maybe another one, but tons of fun. For me, the Xfinity series is special, being a champion of it, racing in it for so many years. Again, Harvick and some of those guys that we raced against one another up in the booth with me was pretty cool. So yeah, I think it was without a doubt my first snapshot of what that booth entails, what that work entails, right? And then from there, I think we did 1 or 2, maybe 3 of those. And I don't know that it was, man, this is what I want to do. That just felt so good type of scenario. But I did enjoy it. COVID, to be honest with you, when COVID hit and we, was kind of no different than anybody else, kind of had a crap sandwich in our hands, trying to figure life out. And that was bad, and it could have been catastrophic for a sport like ours. It was for a lot of sports, but think about, the way, think about the way other sports are. And what I mean by that, of a revenue sharing, charter system, our sport, does it have a charter system? Yes. Is it revenue sharing? No. Is it across the board? No. So we rely on sponsors. And those sponsors, for the most part, are hopefully multi-year deals. And you're sitting there right in the middle of the better part of those, trying to figure out what that means. Are they void? Are we out of business? You know, our sport was in a tough time, and it was a crucial moment in our sport that we needed to figure out faster probably than other sports. And that's exactly what iRacing kind of laid in our laps. And then that's where my opportunity came from. Never forget it. Sitting around at home, to be honest with you, we'd all been kind of doing it already. We were bored, right? A bunch of racers sitting around. What do? We got on iRacing. It was almost like the timing of that was just teed up perfectly. Everybody was looking for something to do. All of us were sitting around late at night, bumming around and you know, racing each other on iRacing, trash talking at night. And it was all your peers and your buddies and, you know, all those worlds collide. I mean, I had music friends, Tim Duggar, and a lot of people that were joining in and racing us. And it was a ton of fun. Well, I think Eric Shanks and Fox kind of caught wind of that and sitting around, and I was literally on my machine racing iRacing when Eric Shanks called and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, well, sir, I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, but I'm playing a video game with my son with Larson and a bunch of other guys racing one another from across the world and everywhere in between. He's like, "Funny you say that. What would you think about doing a race on TV live?" And I was like, "Oh, can that even happen? Like, what are you talking about?" And that's exactly what happened. I literally took my rig, loaded it in the back of my pickup, took it down to the studio, and we went racing. And honestly, had that not have happened, I think our sport would look differently right now. I know the way in which it's broadcasted. I know Fox would have been different. I know my sponsors that I had on my car would have looked different. And I may or may not have been racing. I don't know. But I can tell you, without that moment in time and that ability to be able to change directions and do something to keep us afloat for a month was very impactful and very much needed. And it did just that. It kept us afloat in a tough time. It bridged the gap to some of those sponsors. And that's real. You can't make that up. We had sponsors literally calling, "Hey, paint schemes. We want our paint scheme on that broadcast. We want this, we want that." And it was across the board from, drivers to organizations calling us to manufacturers. "We got to have this paint scheme, not that paint scheme." And then that was the challenge, right? Now we're working hand in hand with iRacing to scramble to know, not only do we have to have Brad Keselowski in the 6 car on this iRacing, now he's got to have the Hawaiian rolls on it. We got to have King's Hawaiian on it. And you can't mess that up. That can't be a mistake. That can't be a miss because there's a lot of money hinging on it. So quickly that becomes something that went from fun to saving a sport, so to speak, in a lot of ways. And all obviously was, little did I know, a job interview as well.
So you harken back, we talked about the sponsors, right? And when you leave your race team, obviously, and you're no longer racing, I mean, you still got personal service contracts. Did you carry over any kind of personal service contracts?
Yeah, I'm driving a Ford F-250 right now. Prime example, I was a Ford guy when I left, and I still am. Is it a different role? Am I doing it because of racing? No, but I host a lot of events for them, Q&As with drivers and stuff like that. And for me, it just keeps me connected to a manufacturer that was good to me. And it gives me a chance to give back a little bit, stay connected, and do some fun things and events with them. And it just works. I think it works for both parties. So the network and the engine of NASCAR is real. And, when you're in it for almost 20 years behind the wheel and represented so many sponsors through those years, that network comes back. I mean, I've done things with Jack Daniels, which was one of my first sponsors.
Yep,
so yes, those endorsement deals are still, around and alive. Is my role within them different? Absolutely. But again, I believe in the engine of NASCAR. I think if it's used, correctly, it always works for a return. And I don't care what level you're at. If the activation meets the performance on those cars and everything in between, it spits out a product worthwhile, and it always has in the 20 years that I've had it, and it still does.
When you first started this, you were working with Jeff Gordon, and I know, when you're in the race car, there's drivers and then there's drivers, and there you were with Jeff Gordon, a legend of our sport.
Then there's Jeff Gordon, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm not trying to take away from any of your accomplishments, but I'm saying, there's no argument that Jeff Gordon did a lot for our sport, brought a lot of eyes on it and things. Was it intimidating to be beside him in the booth when you first started?
No, for me, it was everything but that. It was exciting. Jeff and I, had people only saw the run-ins on the racetrack. Jeff and I have always enjoyed one another's time away from the track. We always kind of flock to one another, maybe after hours at a year-end event, championship banquet, playoff banquets, all those fun things over the years, over that, 17, 18-year run. He was there, and we always kind of, again, flocked to one another. So absolutely not. I knew that was a big key in me going there. As a matter of fact, the only caveat to all of it that was not part of it was knowing that he could leave, and
Yeah.
that was where the big crap moment came from. And damn, what are we going to do now? We made do, right, and made the best of the situation, but absolutely not. I didn't know that he was leaving. I signed on for that very reason, to join, alongside Mike Joy, the legend of Mike Joy, and the legend of Jeff Gordon. I mean, I got to attach my name to that team roster, and, it meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me that I was able to start my broadcasting career with the likes of everybody's heroes. I mean, you can look back at any given impactful moment on the racetrack and hear Mike Joy's voice covering it. And I don't care what, decade it's from. You go back for so many years since I've been watching NASCAR, and virtually every huge moment in NASCAR, you look over your shoulders, and Jeff Gordon was a part of it. So yeah, absolutely. In every, situation you could look, I was all in on joining that team.
Now, compare that with his replacement, Kevin Harvick. What's the comparison now that you're sharing it with Kevin?
Well, first of all, let's go back and there was 2 years there that we had to wait for Kevin.
Yeah.
I kind of knew that, I was patient. I didn't know what they were going to do. In TV, you just never know. Your bosses are in LA. They're working on football. They're working on baseball and everything in between, soccer. Literally all facets of sports. And you don't get to sit down with them on a weekly basis or have a phone call with them on a weekly basis and know what they're thinking all the time. And that's just TV. I've learned that. I don't care what organization it is or what network, it's that way. So, I could, through conversation, through reading between the lines, I knew the wish list after a short amount of time of nobody plugging that hole. It became pretty evident that it was Kevin Harvick for me. So, that just went without saying. That being said, okay, there's the play, but what are we going to do for 2 years? And, that's when it kind of, again, just fell into play. Well, how about, through conversation, what, man, it might be cool to have, how about if we could get Gordon back a couple times or get a Tony Stewart show up? How cool would that be, or Matt Kenseth, another champion, or, this gave us an opportunity while we're waiting to try some things, out of the ordinary and reach outside the box and see what we could come up with. A lot of fun because of that scenario, but it came with a lot of challenges that I didn't foresee. I know my strengths and weaknesses. I know that, I'm a pretty easy conversation. I know that, everybody knows what they're good at and whatnot. You don't really need to be told that. That being said, I figured it would be pretty easy to bring in just about anybody and be able to have some banter, have some rapport with one another, bounce a couple ideas or scenarios off of them and see what they say, and then, be able to figure it out from there, so to speak. The hardest part about having somebody in there different week in and week out is just taking care of business is what I call it. And what I mean by that is, you're almost doing an interview with them instead of when they have the ball, like Jeff Gordon or now even Kevin Harvick, with the time that he's had in a month and a half, you can let him go. You don't have to think about or listen, consciously tell yourself to pay attention to what he's saying, because they haven't been at the track in a while, and you don't want them to, it was my job to make them look good. And that's the responsibility that I took within it. So sometimes I was guilty of spending too much time on making sure that I didn't ask them a question that they couldn't handle, or tee them up on a scenario that, may be different now with the new car with, for instance, the shifting. Hey, these cars got 5 speeds, man. You know that. Don't slip up and say it's not a 4-speed anymore. There's no H pattern, right? It's centrifugal. So, like you have to be careful and mindful that, Matt Kenseth hadn't been around in 4 or 5 years, or even Stewart, or, Danica when she was in there. Like, those are just different. So, that was where the challenge became pretty evident quickly for me. And it was just that. It was every bit of a challenge as anything. Look at Tony Stewart. The first couple, we weren't very good. And I took a lot of responsibility in that, a lot of conversation with Mike Joy, leaning on him and his expertise over the years. He's worked with plenty over the decades, including my goofy butt, right? So I guess what I'm saying is I had a lot of fun with it, but I'm damn glad finally that wait is over, and I've got a consistent man back in the booth. And this is where Kevin Harvick comes out. This is why Kevin Harvick works for me. He is literally the first person that I met in NASCAR. And what I mean by that, I was sponsored by a local Kansas City co-op of Sonic Drive-Ins. He was sponsored by the national campaign of Sonic Drive-Ins. Kansas Speedway come about. The local Sonic Drive-In owner said, hey, would you bring your late model up? I want to do a Sonic Drive-In night. And I've got Kevin Harvick and RCRs bringing a show car, so I'd like to have your car alongside it. They were painted exactly the same. I was like, heck yeah, that's awesome. Never even met a guy in NASCAR, literally never met one. And lo and behold, it was Kevin Harvick. And then he was my first teammate after that, and everything in between. It was just awesome. And so 20 years, later, we're back together and found one another. And if you think about it, the better part of my career behind the wheel was alongside Kevin Harvick. I drove alongside him at RCR. I shared a car, my very first car, it was an Xfinity car that we shared, the 21 car. I drove for him at KHI in trucks and Xfinity. I think I won in both. And then I took off, and then he took off. And then here we are back together at Stewart Haas to end my career. And then flip the page 5 years later, and now we're standing next to one another in the booth. So we can't get away from one another. I'm sure I'm as big a pain in his butt as he is mine. But we know one another. We trust one another. We have each other's back. And when you have that bond, much like I had with Jeff, you can rib on one another and know you're not going to hurt their feelings and know it's coming from the right place. You can correct one another and know you're not going to do that. You can aid one another, right? And work off one another. My energy is not his energy, you know, and again, strengths and weaknesses. He's much more polished and thoughtful than I am. I'm pull the trigger and figure it out later. I have the energy, he probably doesn't. And that's why it works, you know. It's literally I'm everything he's not and vice versa.
And it does work, and it works very well. I mean, seeing you guys in the booth together is really has been great, fantastic, and I can tell the chemistry's there, and I can tell that you guys are feeding off each other, and I think it's, you know, the fans win in that case. But let's finish it up with this, because you had the grind for almost 20 years, 36 races a year, testing and whatever else you were pulled into with sponsors. You're still going to every race for half the year. Is this still kind of a grind like that, or is it a different grind and maybe not in a bad way?
I told Kevin this when he started talking to me in the off season of, you know, what to expect, or started bouncing ideas off of one another, because the challenge is, you know, you always want to be fresh. You know, you gotta, we're going back to the same racetrack for the fourth year now for me, and I've got to come up with something to say that I didn't say the prior 3 years. The track's the same, the cars are the same, the drivers are the same, everything's the same. How do we look at the, you know, crystal ball and or this setting and make it different? So for me, that's a lot of fun, a great deal of fun. You know, and you still have good days and bad days. You still have that competitive vibe up there. And that's what I told Kevin. I said, you're going to be mad at yourself when you miss a call. I was this weekend. I didn't necessarily do as good as I could have done on, you know, 2 scenarios there at the end of the race. You know, I wish that I would have worded a couple things a little bit different on the restart. I still feel like in my mind, I meant what I said. I would stand by that, but I'd have said it a little differently. You know, and then when Bubba got into Larson there, I probably asked for the wrong replay, which is on me. And, you know, it didn't necessarily show the play as big as I needed it to. And I called the play a little bit wrong. Got the overall outcome right. But again, the frustration was there, you know. Kevin has had a couple and I will too. So that competitive nature is still there in a big way. It feels good when it's that baby slides in a slot, you say the right thing, or you tee up a scenario and, you know, you tell the guys, hey, you need to get on Tyler Reddick right here. Him and they're going to get into it, and boom, it happens. You're like, told you, you know, that feels so good, just like it did in that race car. Do I miss driving? Sometimes. Do I miss that grind? Hell no. Do I miss the letdown of driving? No. And that's why I got out of that car. I was no longer willing to put in the time and effort that it took to be good. And my results were paying the price of it. And, you know, were you making a hell of a living and getting paid more than you should? Hell yes. But hell yes, you were. You know, that's a hard thing to let go of, because it's not a smart thing to let go of. But fortunately for me, my opportunity came along and I got the offer with TV, and it filled a lot of those voids that I knew that I would have. And I don't look at it in any way, shape, or form as a regret. It's probably the best thing that's happened to me in the last 4 years. I get so much more time to spend with my family. I'm connected to this sport that I love. I get to sell it. I mean, I love selling this sport to fans. I told you when I started this interview, I believe in the engine of NASCAR. Mm-hmm. I've lived it. I can show you everything that I own is because of the engine of NASCAR. If you hustle, it's there. If you hustle on that racetrack, you get paid. And if you hustle your ass off away from it, you get paid more. And I'm a prime example of that. I had mediocre results and I got paid handsomely, probably better than most. And I took care of business off the racetrack and handled a lot of my own deals, things like that. And it was hard, right? But my personality and growing up in a business of a car dealership, working there on all facets of that with my younger brother, dragging people out of the ditch with my dad's towing service, bringing them into those dealerships. You met a lot of people. You remember those relationships, and when it's time to call on them, they answered. So that principle in which I was raised helped me in racing, and I don't mean that behind the wheel. I mean away from it. Outside of the racetrack. So, all those things kind of played a role in being able to fill into this slot and have fun doing it, because that's the biggest thing, man. It is a grind, and if you're not enjoying it, it's going to show.
Mm-hmm.
I got to the point in that car, I didn't like it, and I can't hide my emotions. When I see that's my biggest problem. When I see a boring race, I'm going to tell you, folks, I don't know how to tell you any different. Kyle Larson's, he's going to win. He's without a caution or something stupid happening, there is no chance anybody's beating him today. I remember back in the day, Kyle Busch or whoever, like you can't lie. You can't, and people are smart. Like our fans aren't dumb. They've been watching this sport in and out and all the different things, all the race hubs daily that set it up. They know the sport, they know the stats, and you can't lie to them. What I can do is create, as much as I can, a fun environment that they feel like Kevin and I are sitting at home in their living room on the couch watching this and bench racing and bouncing fun things off one another or challenging one another and calling a race. That's what's fun about it. And I feel like that's the way it needs to be.
And you know what? I'll tell you this, Clint, you do make it fun. I'm not blessed enough to be able to get to every race. I only get to about half of them myself. But watching you and watching your commentary on races and there, you do make it fun. And I can't always say that about some of the people we've had in the booth before you and Jeff, and not including Mike Joy, because Mike Joy is a national treasure. But you do make it fun. So, and I hope it's many years to come. And we open kind of mentioning Martinsville. I want to ask you this. As a member of the media, I've learned that you cheer for the stories, not necessarily for the drivers. Is that the case with you? Do you cheer for the stories more than you cheer for the drivers?
It's hard for me. You have to do both. If you don't cheer for the drivers, and if it ain't for the drivers, the stories won't exist. I cheer for those drivers to be edgy. I cheer for them to go for it. I don't like a driver that lays up. And by the way, I was a driver that laid up.
Yeah.
We just debated this on the pre-race show last weekend. Harvick is already, one of his ideas is we're going to compare William Byron to Kyle Larson. They have pretty damn close resumes right now from their tenure with Hendrick already. And I told him, I said, you're never going to convince me that Byron is as impactful as Larson, because that Larson will look at the DNS. Larson's had 16, Byron's had 7.
Yeah.
Larson's won 8, he's won 10. Larson's led 4,000 more laps or something and has better top 5s and better 10s, but he's DNF more. What's that tell you? He went for it. And I like that, because without drivers like that, you don't have the cautions, you don't have the storylines, and you don't have the highlights. We need that. We need that. And I'm not saying, you asked me about drivers or storylines. I'm not just jumping on Larson's bandwagon, but I think he's a prime example. I think Kyle Busch, we have to have that guy. You got to have that guy. And if he's gone, somebody's got to fill that slot very quickly, because without those, the storylines don't come.
So let me end with this. Who you got for Martinsville this weekend then?
Well, it'd be somebody in a Gibbs car or Hendrick car. Unfortunately, I don't like that.
No.
I don't. We've beaten the drum about the parity in our sport and things like this, and I'm not on that bandwagon. I feel like it's if you come and wear somebody out for a while because you had more horsepower, because you found a better shock or spring package, or you found something they didn't have, well, you deserve it, right? But right now it's money. And really that's what it boils down to. It's money. They can say whatever they want about charters and stuff like this, but how many employees does Hendrick have, does Gibbs have compared to even Penske? The size of, Operation Penske is, Penske's a business. Those other two are a hobby. And one of them has a manufacturer for a partner. The other one is a complete hobby for this man. So when you've got a guy like him with the money he has, and the only option is to win, that's all you have to worry about. Money's not an option, but the option is to win or you're fired or figure something else out. That's a dangerous combination. I mean, you're talking 150 to 200 more employees than the third guy in line. And then now you're talking fourth and fifth guys, you're talking 300 employees. Yes, you're buying a car from a catalog. Yes, they're all bought from the same place, or, they have the same parts and components. But when you're talking about simulation and you're talking about the crumbs that make the difference, manpower is going to win. It's a war out there, and the more men you got on the ground, the better your chances. That's what's going on right now.
Well, Clint, great insight, great story, great stories, and as always, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking the time. Have fun this weekend in Martinsville and the rest of your season. I'm really, really happy for you because, like you said, we need a Kyle Busch and we need Kyle Larson. Well, I'll obviously put you on that list.
Chastain, man. He's a list too, buddy. Chastain, don't lose that one.
Well, I also want to put you on that list because we need you and your insight and your great commentary and everything. So appreciate it, Clint. Thank you, my friend. Have a great rest of your week. So always a great interview with Clint Bowyer. Look for a story in Forbes in the coming days based off that interview. And I really like the way he, the passion he has for the sport. He is a great addition. And as in the interview, I said that, when you see people who have made an impact on the sport, Clint Bowyer is definitely among those, and he's going to continue to make an impact for years to come up in the booth, and he's only going to get better from here. So I'm looking forward to that. But
just rant and rave like you do to the TV during sports.
All right, let's talk about rants. We kind of briefly touched on this, Owen. We raced on Easter at Richmond. And I wonder if that played into the empty grandstands or if it's been the quality of the racing there in the last few years. What is your take? Do you think Easter was part of the problem?
I think it probably didn't help, but I think part of the issue also was the rain. I think there's always going to be some fans who are not going to want to come to the race when it starts raining. And I've covered Richmond for the past couple of years. I haven't seen the grandstands full as far as I can remember for a while. I think recently Richmond just hasn't put on the kind of racing that its action track moniker inspires. And I think that it's just overall, like we talked about, not as exciting.
Maybe we need to change the action track. Change something else.
The strategy track.
The strategy. Yeah, I'm gonna put a bug in their ear. Strategy track. All right. So I agree with you. And I did like the fact that it was late on Sunday night. I mean, if you got to work, you got to get up. I mean, the race ended 11 o'clock. So it wasn't too bad, even with the rain delay. And I think that was part of the save on NASCAR's part. And you've got all day. So your brunch is done. You've gone to church. If you go to church, you've had your family time, and now you can sit down and watch a race. So I'm not opposed to seeing it on Easter. Like somebody else pointed out, Jordan Bianchi, as a matter of fact, from The Athletic, pointed out, we had the March Madness games going on. There was a hockey game. I'm a huge hockey fan. Tampa Bay Lightning, they played that day. And then the NFL plays on Christmas Day. As a matter of fact, they're going to play on Christmas Day, which is a Wednesday this year. So I think that racing on the holiday is not necessarily a factor, but I think once they improve the racing, and like you said, the short track package and maybe something with the tires, and have a reason for people to go out there. I do like it better at night. I know we went away from the night racing a couple years ago, and now we're back to, we did the night racing Sunday night. I think Richmond, one of the vibes is having it at night and racing under the lights. I like that part of it. So whether it's one race or two races, Easter or no Easter, let's run it under the lights. Let's not put it out in the day. And I think that'll improve the racing a whole bunch. So, we'll see. And I think, having the holidays is not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't know if you agree with that.
I think I agree with you, and I think Jeff Gluck, the other athletic contributor, pointed out that it's hard on the drivers, it's hard on the people who work in the sport. But I think to me that's the price of spectator sports. To me, it's a great family tradition to put on sports on Thanksgiving, on Christmas, with the family, watch racing on Easter. I think that's a great thing for NASCAR, and I think the ratings back that up. They were a little bit lower than Bristol Dirt last year, but their Easter ratings were, per Adam Stern, higher than they have been so far on Fox this season outside of the 500. So I think the ratings were high, and I think a lot of families probably tuned in.
So we're probably going to see a race next Easter, whether that's Richmond or not. We'll see. And then of course we're going to race on Mother's Day at Darlington, which I remember when that started many years ago, and they were saying, oh, it's going to go in the crapper, and it turned out to be great. And now it's a tradition, and I think I love it. So we also had the Richmond restart, the final restart, where they said Hamlin jumped the restart. And then the NASCAR officials later admitted they may have missed a call, but it was the end of the race, and they really didn't have time to change it. And I agree with one of them. What Elton Sawyer, who's the competition director, said. There's no doubt he admitted that no doubt Hamlin rolled early, but it's a bang bang call. It's the end of the race, live sporting event. We don't have the luxury of a timeout to review and make that call. But he's right. If it happens, lap 10, 50 or 300, the call could have been different. So Sawyer suggests a restart. There was a slight jump and could have been officiated differently if it occurred in the race. But I also agree with the side of it that if they would have taken the race away from Hamlin for jumping the restart, if it would have been even more grossly, worse than it was, if they would have taken the win away from Hamlin, I think that would have been a lot worse and too big of a penalty. What do you think?
I think it goes back to the discussion we had last week about track limits at COTA and how NASCAR was willing to give SVG a 30-second penalty for, I think it was third place last week. And I think if you don't enforce it on the last lap, you open it up. I mean, potentially at Martinsville, where the restart is such a big advantage, you can clear the car. I think they tend to start on the outside now. If you can clear the car to your inside going into turn one, you have such a big advantage. If I'm at Martinsville in an overtime restart, I'm going to jump if I know NASCAR is not going to take the win away. I think it opens up that kind of that perverse incentive almost. And I like that NASCAR is open about it, but I think there comes a point where you have to enforce it.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and we'll have to see how it handles, how they handle that going forward, and we'll see. But of course, we had a lot of knee jerk reactions from people who said, they handed Hamlin the race. I don't think so, because Hamlin was quick at the end, and his pit crew did get him out before everybody else. So, could it have been different if they would have said, thrown the yellow and redid the restart? I don't know. We'll see. But of course, you had the people with the knee-jerk reactions. And then you've got the people, and these people drive me crazy. We're talking about rants here. Conspiracy theories. I have never been a believer in conspiracy theories, especially not in NASCAR, but nowhere else either, simply because to do a conspiracy theory, you have to have too many people involved. And somebody is actually going to end up saying something if they try to turn around and say, we never landed on the moon. Well, you've got too many people involved in that. And the same thing as in NASCAR. The industry is competitive. And if somebody, if they paid off somebody that said, we want you to finish second, and here's an extra $100,000 or whatever, somebody's going to end up paying a lot more to find out the truth. So there's no conspiracy theory there. And I know you're smart enough, future lawyer and all, that you probably feel the same way about conspiracy theories.
Oh, I agree with you. I think the one thing that I've seen interesting just in the sports industry in general is some of the allegations of that in, I think it's baseball, where some players are with the rise of sports betting, potentially playing less to make sure that some of these parlays hit. So I wonder if sports betting might change that. But for me, I don't see any conspiracies in that restart. I know you can say, Wallace is Hamlin's driver, so he wrecked Larson to make sure Hamlin would get up to trick. It's very, it's a tenuous thing at best, and I don't think there's any reason to be for any conspiracy about drivers here.
I agree with you. So, all right, wrapping up the rest of the news, the North Wilkesboro grandstands, they had the big not controversy, but the big thing, and I kudos to Speedway Motorsports. They had a sinkhole open up under one of the grandstands, and rather than saying, "Oh, we got a sinkhole that opened up and everybody's fine and we're just going to patch it and everything's good," they really planted the seed out there, because there was talk that there used to be a hidden cave that they used to use for moonshine there. And that used to be a legend. So they played off of that, and I thought it was great. Great piece of PR, because it got everybody's attention. It was a viral story. They fixed that this week, and we actually got our first look inside the grandstand, inside the hole underneath. And there was no cave, there was no still, but the Speedway Motorsports representative on site kind of left it open to speculation, so to speak.
It's hard to tell. I mean, one of those things, we look for things that were either laying or buried, so we didn't want to dig too deep into it. I referenced, I think, being an archaeologist for a certain extent, but one, we don't have the time to go deep diving and really digging into things. We've got to get things put back together. But it's still plausible. I mean, like I said, there's things that are underneath there that you wouldn't see under a grandstand typically from a construction stance. Like, you wouldn't see columns, you wouldn't see a wall. That makes no sense why those things are in place. Now, there may be a reason that they placed that years ago, but those people aren't here to tell us those stories, and just looking at it from a common knowledge, it really doesn't make sense why they're there. So I think it's still plausible. It's still got, that Mythbusters needs to come out maybe and do something on it to prove it, but I think that there is still a chance that something was there. You don't find holes like that just by chance, and you don't find columns and walls in place under grandstands by chance. So we had to move forward. We didn't get to spend an entire time really, looking and digging around trying to find jars of moonshine or things of that nature. But keep in mind, if those guys were really doing something like that, all that stuff was probably gone anyway, right? Like, they never left a site just sitting abandoned. It was either blown up or disappeared, or they moved it somewhere else. So the likability of finding something was probably slim anyway.
All right. So the penalties came out this week. Joey Gase, who threw a piece of bumper at Dawson Cram at Richmond, was given $5,000 fine. Brock Beard argued that Joey Gase shouldn't be penalized more than a slap on the wrist, but I think NASCAR made it clearly known that you shouldn't be throwing parts and pieces on the track, and $5,000 is a big deal to people like Joey Gase, and I don't know. He deserved it, I think, but we want to have the emotions, and we want to have that kind of stuff on the track. What do you think about that, Owen?
I think there's a fine line between emotions and, throwing an entire bumper at someone, walking into the line of cars under caution, throwing a bumper at someone. I think, it's going to be on the highlight reel, just like Brock Beard said. And I as a side note, I think Brock is great for NASCAR. He has some great, strong opinions, and I love the way he presents it. And on this one, I just have to disagree with him, because there's a time and a place for emotions. In the interview, great. Talk about how, he's not showing you any respect, but then don't go and put yourself in danger, put him in danger. If that sheet metal hits the wrong way, if you fall into the racing line, there's plenty of ways that could go wrong. And I don't think we need to be encouraging that as emotion in the sport.
So there you go. You think he deserves a bigger penalty, I'm assuming. I
do. I think, it's just opening the door for more of it.
Well, we'll see. I mean, obviously we don't have the Ross Chastain style right in the wall at Martinsville anymore. So we'll see if the rest of the competitors feel the same. Another story that came out this week, obviously, Stewart-Haas Racing, I'm hearing it may be running into some trouble, and I hope it's not true, because they're a great organization, and I'm a huge fan of everything Stewart-Haas Racing. Could be downsizing. We'll see. They've got the 4 teams now. You could see them down to 2. I don't know. We'll have to see. It's a tough market out there. And they may want to sell a couple of their charters and downsize. And obviously, if they sell some charters, that would give them an influx. But I'm just hearing the rumors. I'm not hearing anything for sure. But
Well,
we'll
they're finally
see.
running a little bit better this year with Barry kind of up front at Richmond. The 14's been running well this year, and Gregson has been showing some speed, especially at Phoenix. So I think if there's ever not a time to downsize, it's right when they're back on the upswing. So we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird because the rumors did come out there, and it's like Barry had a fantastic run. He was second in the second stage. So we'll see, and we'll see how it plays out. All right, let's talk about Martinsville, because guess what? Owen Johnson is going to be making his first trip to Martinsville, Virginia this week. And I'm excited for you, pal. You looking forward to going?
Oh, I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's a historic track. I'm really looking forward to seeing some real short track racing.
And one of the other person that's going to be making their first trip there, well, not their first trip as a competitor is Friday night's truck race. Cam Waters, another Australian supercar driver, is going to be making his debut. And he said he's been trying to do that for a long, long time.
Yeah, I'm absolutely pumped. So super excited to be, finally having a race over here in a truck. And, I've always followed NASCAR and done a lot of oval stuff myself on dirt in Australia. So to do a, pavement oval is pretty cool for me and something I've always wanted to do. I'd say probably 18 months. And then, 12 months ago, come to Martinsville and checked out a race. That was the first race I'd been to. So, it's always been a bit of an interest there. I've been very lucky with my race team in Australia, Tickford Racing, that they've allowed me to, look outside the square and do a bit more racing on the side. And they see it as a compliment to, my racing in Australia. They let me race a 410 sprint car over the summer. So, if I can do something that's going to complement my racing, they're all for it.
And of course, there's the famous Martinsville hot dog, which everybody tells him he's got to try.
You're not the first person to say that, so I think I'm going to have to go there and experience it for sure.
All right. So your assignment this weekend not only is to have fun and enjoy one of the best tracks in America, but you're going to be eating a Martinsville hot dog. And even if you're vegan, I don't know, you're vegan? You're not a vegan, are you?
No, I'll have a hot dog.
All right. And what we're going to do is, if we can arrange it, we're going to try and video this. So your visit to the stand and the hot dogs, and we'll see. So I'm looking forward to that, but also look forward to your coverage this weekend from Martinsville. I know you're going to have a blast. I'll be there in the fall, and maybe if you're back from school in the fall, we can both be there. That'll be great. But Martinsville's a great track to go to. And I know you're looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to knowing you're there. So look for Owen's coverage from Martinsville this weekend. And what are you looking forward to doing besides eating a freaking hot dog?
I'm looking forward to just seeing some shorter track racing than I've ever seen with NASCAR. Richmond is the first track I ever saw, and it's a great short track. But I think some of the classic elements of, bumping and banging, trying to get around, bump and run at Martinsville, I'm really looking forward to.
Well, there you go. So if you're going to be at Martinsville this weekend, look for Owen Johnson. He'll be a little paler because he's living in England right now. So make sure you wear some sunscreen. Yeah, make sure you wear some sunscreen. The weather's supposed to be great. So I'm looking forward to that. We will be talking to Owen next week about his Martinsville experience, about his hot dog experience. I want all of you to have a great rest of your week. We will talk to you next week. We will talk about Martinsville and hot dogs and all kind of stuff, and sinkholes and moonshine and everything. Have a great week, everybody. See ya. Thanks for listening to Speed Talk Live. For questions, or just to tell us how bad our production is, or to leave other feedback, leave us a comment below. For all the latest NASCAR news, visit www.cupscene.com. Until next time, peace out, and let's go racing.
right. There's the checkered flag. Great job, driver.